Hello and good morning friends, welcome to the CEC-UGC live lecture. Dear friends, with our ongoing series on organizational behavior, today we are conducting 5th lecture in the series and we would be talking on communication and feedback. Dear friends, as you know, communication is an essential part of one's life and feedbacks becomes more important while we are in communication. So how communication and feedback are interrelated, we would be discussing in detail, and for this discussion we have once again with us in our studios Dr. Namita Rajput. Dr. Namita Rajput is a principal in Sri Aurobindo Evening College, University of Delhi. So let's welcome our guest Dr. Namita Rajput and let's try to understand the topic communication and feedback. Hello ma'am, welcome to the EduSec lecture.
So good morning friends. Today we have a very interesting topic of the organization behavior called communication and feedback. As you all know, communication is very, very important to endorse the information from one person to another, to one group to another group. So it is a process of exchange of information, and information is conveyed in n number of ways, like we communicate through our words, we communicate through our tone of the language which we use, as a body language also, which is also known as kinesics. So there are n number of ways in which we disseminate and endorse our information in the public. So communication has to be very, very efficient, communication has to be very, very strong, and in terms of if you are a good communicator, so you'll be able to make people understand the basic essence of everything which you want to communicate. So with this backdrop, let us start with what communication is all about and what is the feedback system. So communication is the process of exchange of information, and information is conveyed as words, tone of voice and the body language, which is also known as kinesics. There are studies which have shown that there is a different percentage of the ways of communication in this regard. So as you know that the vocal tone accounts for about 55% of the information communicated. That is, if you are having a good tone, so people would understand that what kind of information you are transferring and in what way. And in terms of the other things, we have when we use the body language to communicate our information, it is about 38%, and the rest of it is communicated by the other ways of means. Your highs and low in your voice also is a very big indicator of communicator, and definitely when you understand each other in terms of your body language, that is the best way you can communicate. And sometimes we also say that the face is the index of mind, as in when what kind of feelings you have on your face and the body language together, then people would understand on the other side of it that what is the basic essence of your communication. Effective communication is very important because in the heart of every management principle, communication lies. So you have to have the best communication, and the brevity is the essence of communication because nobody has got time in this cosmopolitan life. So the brief you are, the better it is. Similarly, the brevity is the kind of the information which is in brief form and it in a very crisp form. So everyone is looking for this kind of an information. So effective communication is a means to reach out the number of employees in the organization. Successful employees do well and they focus on the communication effectively with all levels in the organization. The success of an individual in a team depends greatly on the extent to which he can engage in the effective communication, and faulty communication in the organizations can lead to very lowered effectiveness and effectiveness at all levels, whether it is an organization level or at an individual level. And also most important of the interpersonal conflict is the problem in the communication, that is the faulty communication. So we have seen the essence of communication is very important. The brevity is one aspect. Clarity is another aspect, feedback is another aspect. So to what extent you can be brief and clear is the most important aspect of communication. And definitely there are number of words which also play a very important role in the communication, because sometimes the use of wrong words can always create a friction, and the interpersonal relationship can also cause a deep problem in this case, because when you're in an organization you have to take into consideration and envelop all the people together and work as a team. But yes, if you are using some wrong words, some faulty words, and your body language is conveying certain negative things, you will not be able to influence the people. So for an impactful personality in terms of the communication, effective communication, all these parameters are of paramount importance. Although the frontiers of the communication is large, but yes, if you want to be a good communicator, all these aspects have to be kept in mind. The way you speak, the tone which you use, the words which you use, and the body language. So all these parameters together will be also called as effective communication. So as a matter of fact, communication is very important whether you are at a middle level or at a lower level or at a higher level. So everywhere communication plays a very vital and pivotal role to make the things happen. Because unless and until the things are communicated, there you will not be able to have a clarity in the terms of the roles which is defined onto the people. So first the clarity, second the brevity, and the feedback. These are the three pillars of communication, and you make sure that whatever medium you use should also be very clear, because sometimes there is a written communication, so that's your email, your fax, your written black and white statements, etc., your notices, your circulars in the offices, etc. But when it comes to the verbal communication, you have to be very particular in terms of your tone, in terms of your kinesics, in terms of your way of speaking, and of course your body language. All these parameters are very, very important for an individual to become an effective communicator. So taking my presentation forward, let us have now the basic concept of the communication. Communication is derived from a Latin word which is also called as communicare, which means to share. It is a process of transmitting of the information and understanding. It is the transference of the meaning between the individuals and the means of reaching and understanding and influencing others. Skill to communicate depends upon the capacity of an individual to convey the ideas, the feelings to another to evolve a desired response. In the management, communication is a mixture of personal attributes, organizational aspects. Good communication is necessary for all organizations, as management functions in organizations are carried out through communication. Effective management is a function of effective interpersonal communication. It takes place every time we interact with others. So not only this, communication is considered effective when it succeeds in evoking a desired response from the other person. Moreover, failures in the communication can be very costly for the organization by way of reduced cooperation and subsequently the ill feeling between the employees. Communication to be effective cannot be a haphazard process. It has to be a very planned, executed, so that it evokes a desired response. So under this particular backdrop, we can always say that communication is very, very important. Unless and until the effective communication is not there in the organization, you will not be able to have the desired responses. So in order to have the desired responses, you have to be very particular about the planning aspect of it, how it is to be executed, what kind of words have to be put in if it is in a written communication, and of course so many other parameters have to be kept in mind. It has to be embedded. Basically when you're drafting anything, when it is in terms of the written communication, and of course the verbal communication is even difficult because sometimes the people they are not able to understand the way and the words you use. So you have to be very particular about your language, your usage of words. Your time, place and opportunity also makes a very important difference in communication. If there are any kind of communication gaps, it can prove to be very, very costly for the organization, because organization means a path of success. So if you want the organization or any kind of institution to be a success, you should try to bridge the gaps. Because there are so many gossips which will be around your ears. There will be people who will be giving you wrong information. There are so many other aspects. So you have to break the ties. You have to see and read between the lines. You have to lift the veil and see the realities and take decisions accordingly. So good communicator is one who will take care of all these essential parameters, because if you want the desired responses to be evoked, you have to be very particular about all these aspects, because you have to develop a teamwork, and teamwork can only be developed by effective communication. Otherwise, if the communication is not effective, the people will be having a heart burning, there will be ill feelings about the head of the institution, maybe it is a director of a company or a CEO of the company. So people will start withdrawing themselves from the core of the working of the organization for that matter. So, the real essence of communication is that all the words should be very clear, it should be executed properly, and if the people are having any kind of problems in terms of the executed messages, it should be resolved there and then. Like for example, I'll tell you, there is a gossip in the organization that the organization will be closed 2 hours early today. So if the question comes from the employee side, that is it so? So it's not that you should not be ignoring such kind of messages. You should respect any kind of a query which is coming out from any of the mouth of the employees, and solving of these kind of small queries, although they are very trivial, although they are very, very small in nature, but yes, they can be a real disastrous problem if they are not solved there and then. So you have to be very particular about all these aspects, that all the doubts of the organizational employees must be cleared there and then, because they will also have a kind of a feeling that yes, our thoughts are being taken care of, there is a voice which is being heard, and people will start coming to the organization, they will start making a team building, and that is the real essence of communication. There are so many aspects of the management like planning, organizing, coordinating, controlling. There are so many techniques, there are programs, strategies. Everything requires effective communication. So lot of care, lot of efforts, lot of diligence, lot of rationality has to be embedded in this aspect and in this regard. So taking it forward, let us see what the communication channel is all about. First, there is a sender, and the sender will always encode the message. And encoding of the message is most important because you have to be very particular about the receiver. If you are using English words and the receiver is only having the information and the skills to understand Hindi, then of course this message is a failure right from the beginning. So when you start with a communication channel, you have to see what the sender, the receiver has to receive the message. Then you have to encode the message. Encoding of the message also requires many kind of parameters like diligence, use of right words, use of right channel, and of course when it is being received by the receiver, he will decode the message in his own way. Now I tell you, there are a number of ways in which the messages are decoded. Like I am brought up into a Hindu family, my aspects, my upbringing is definitely different from a Sikh person or from a Christian person, because we are having our own life stories, we have our own highs and lows in our life. So there we are having our own convictions, we are having our own whims and fancies. So whatever messages we decode will be influenced by all these backdrop factors. So to make the communication channel effective, you have to see that the messages which are drafted are very simple, so that all these backdrops, they are not able to affect it, and eventually the channel which you use has to be effective. So to make it effective, you have to be very careful about all these aspects. Then of course the channel which you use, the channel could be a television, it could be a phone, it could be a mobile phone, it could be a satellite phone, it could be a fax, it could be any kind of delivery machines which you use in your offices. It could be linked with the ERP packages or whatever. The essence is that the communication, whatever information you want to endorse or you want to disseminate, is effectively communicated and in the same sense onto the receiver. So here the effectiveness of the message is very, very important. Then of course the major aspect of this is that there has to be a feedback. Like when we do a classroom teaching, after explaining a concept, the last thing which we ask is, do you have any problems? Have you understood the concepts which has been discussed in the class? So we should always try and have a counter question and a feedback session, because the real communicator is one who is able to make the things understandable onto the others, making use of the simple language, simple concepts, etc. So the communication channel starts with the sender, encoding of the message, choosing the right channel. Then of course the receiver should also receive the information in the same regard, and of course there has to be supported by a feedback mechanism. The feedback mechanism is a magical aspect to make the communication most effective. So these are the 5 steps which has to be involved in the communication channel. Now coming on to a very new and a very diligent aspect called transaction analysis. Transaction analysis is a theory which portrays and explains the personality of an individual. The theory of transactional analysis is based on the principle that decisions made today by a person is the result of the culminated wisdom acquired by that person from the past experience. The past of an individual becomes the very basis for laying the foundation stone of the future, and however, it may be that the past experience which used to be appropriate at one time may not hold as good today. The purpose of transactional analysis is providing the autonomy. Autonomy can be referred to as a phenomena which integrates responsiveness, impulsiveness, and the competencies for the familiarity. The process of achieving the autonomy, individuals take new decisions, which can be referred to as taking the decisions again and in the process of changing the way their life is at present and thus empowering themselves. So transaction analysis can also be credited to a blend of psychology, physiotherapy, and of course thus integrated the description of psychometric, humanistic and cognitive approaches. So we have seen in detail the transactional analysis. It is all about explaining an individual. And of course, when we explain an individual about its nature and etc., it is definitely at one point of time influenced, about your past. That what kind of highs and lows you have gone through, what kind of stories you have, what kind of, the kind of childhood you had, what kind of luxuries or maybe a bad time you had when you were a child. So, it is not about one-time factor. Human beings are grown up in a very different way and they are different from all other animals, etc., because we have one aspect that is called the wisdom. And the wisdom is not acquired immediately. Like you are listening to this lecture, maybe you are able to have good takeaways about what communication is all about, what is the channel used. But yes, the wisdom is, acquired over the years. And whatever information you have gathered, whatever lifespan you have lived, all these things are culminated together, and of course only then you will be able to have a good personality, you will be able to have the good wisdom. So all these factors deeply is called as a transactional analysis. This is very important part of the psychology, and there are other fields also because it's a combination of many disciplines together like humanistic and cognitive approaches and of course the psychology, etc. Because organization behavior, this particular technique of transactional analysis is used to strategize many kind of policies, to make certain programs, because unless and until you know the individual, you will not be able to have any kind of insight about how the individual thinks, how he feels, etc. Now the credit of propounding the transactional analysis theory goes to Eric Berney, who was born in Canada and worked in US as a psychiatrist. And as a result of high level of dissatisfaction experienced by Berney with the slow pace in which the psychoanalysis was used as a tool to rid people of their problems, he conceived the idea of transactional analysis. He objected the traditional psychoanalysis for the expensive time holds, needless complex details, and poor communication with the clients. Transactional analysis was developed as an extension of psychoanalysis with extended concepts and techniques designed especially to address the people and treat them in a group. Before the publication of the actual book, that is, the Berney took several years to formulate the framework through which the transactional analysis could brought out onto the world. And if we try to probe the deeper into the terminology, then the transaction would mean the most essential unit of the social interaction. Earlier, the psychotherapy was considered to be lacking scientific measurement in terms of not having the quantifiable basic unit of study. Berney provided the basic unit in the form of transaction, which further led to a rigorous analysis. So we have seen here that the whole concept of transactional analysis is on to the Berney. He developed this concept of transactional analysis, and this is definitely an improvement over the psychoanalysis which was done in the past. So there was not a good measurement of the transaction, the psychoanalysis, but yes, this transaction analysis which was developed, it countered the limitations of the psychoanalysis, and of course this is a better parameter, it is having a quantifiable amount, and of course it is good for the psychologist to understand people very, very deeply. So in this backdrop, let us move forward with the types of the ego states. It is very important to understand there are different stages of ego. The first is by the parent, second is by the adult, and third is by the child. So when you talk about the parent, the first is the parent ego state, that is the behavior, thoughts, feelings copied from parents and parents' figures. So when you really endorse the information onto the parents, it is called as a parent ego, that is the behavior, thoughts, feelings copied from the parents, and of course the parents' figures, because they are the one role model which the child always see in front of him, and of course the most important influential people in the life of the child is the parent. So this is what is called as a parent ego. Then comes the adult ego. Adult ego states what? It is the behavior, thought and feelings and the direct responses to here and now. So there are so many adults people present, so whatever they do, they also have a disseminating impact onto the individuals in this regard. The third is a child. There is a child ego state, that is the behavior, thoughts and feelings are replayed from the childhood. That is whatever you have learned from your childhood, you have some kind of implication and spillover when you grow in your life. So there are three types of the ego states. So parent, adult and child. All these basic analysis, psychoanalysis, transactional analysis, the type of ego states, it is very important for an individual to understand the basic terminology onto it, because they are the ones which will help you in strategizing the policies, the programs, the strategies, and to make the organization a big success. So thank you so much. So let us do these types of ego states in a very detailed manner. So let us see the first one, the types of the ego state. An ego state can be referred to as a basket of thoughts, process, feelings, experiences and behavior exhibited which are somewhat related to each other, in which elements of an individuality is noticeable at a given point of time. All the transactional analyses are based on the ego states of an individual. Ego states take into consideration all the vital facets of the human personality and could be deemed to be very, very significant as a part of transactional analysis. The behavior of an individual at a particular time in time depends upon the employment of an ego state and the behavior resembles the concurrency of the behavior and the ego state employed. So basically, when you talk about the ego state, it is referred to as a basket of thoughts, process, feelings and experience of the behavior of an individual. So all these things are very important because they will be used in the transactional analysis and to make the policies for the organization. Now, as we discussed, there are three particular ego states: the parent, the child and the adult. So let us do the first, that is the parent ego state in the first. This state consists of the value, beliefs, core ideas, morals and behavior which portray the significantly the authority which could be principally seen in the parents, and these are learned or in a way borrowed from our parents or elderly well-wishers. There are basically two ways to express the parent ego, one which is critical and the other which is nurturing behavior. We must have the experience that are having a nurturing parent and also is critical parent, or some parents behave in both the manners at opportune times. A nurturing parents could be loving, caring, permission, giving, soft and mild, and in contrary, the critical parent may be prejudiced by specific thought process, feelings and beliefs. When a person goes into a parent ego state, he or she is not a parent presently, would behave as a parent. This is a state where people behave in a way their parents would have behaved with them. So this is a kind of a state that whatever you learn from your parents, you try and give the same aspects to them. Although some people not necessarily will have the same behavior, some will have a positive learning and some people will have a negative learning. And of course, the parents are the ones who have got a strong influence onto the child. So your behavior are definitely influenced by the parents. So this is called as a parent ego. Next is your adult ego state. This state could be construed as a data processing center where data, that is the happening around the world, are processed. This becomes a part of our personality, that is which can be processed the data in a very accurate way. The ego state also talks about the seeing, hearing, learning and thinking process. The way you see, the way you hear, the way you do, there is a learning process. Of course, they are done by the adult people which are surrounding you, and the child will always pick up the aspects and the things which are happening around all these issues. So these solutions therefore are well thought of and well analyzed. Unlike the prejudiced thoughts and the childlike emotions, the decisions taken are based on the real-time facts and the real-time data and the real and authentic. So the basic crux of the adult ego is that whatever is happening around, whatever are the realities, they will have a strong spillover onto your actions and the way you think and the way you behave. Then comes the child ego. The child ego state is an innate element of the human beings and explains the real and the natural personality of an individual or a person. It comprises of the feelings, desires and impulse actions and also includes the previous recordings, that is the previous happenings in the life of a person. The child ego state is further divided into natural child, that is a free child, and the adapted child, having positive as well as negative aspects. The positive features of a natural child, when can be noted, are spontaneous, lovable, charming and innocent. Natural child also brings, of course, the creativity, the curiosity and the intuition, which are the basic features of a childhood. The natural child also expresses the emotions in a very free way, and it is definitely not influenced by anything. That is, if the child is sad, will show the sad figure. If the child is happy, will always be a happy figure, etc. And on the other contrary, the negative features and the responses thereby are also that the natural child can be reckless when they perceive that there is a danger of there being safety. So safety is definitely compromised in this aspect. An adapted child definitely is one whose behavior is influenced by his parents. For instance, they would behave in a way which their parents would like them to behave. Therefore, obedience, discipline, behaving in a cultured manner depict the positive behavior of an adapted child, and thus they respond appropriately in a social situations. The negative aspect of an adapted child is seen, which gives his or her autonomy and takes action which disregard their own value systems, worth and dignity. This type of disregard can also be termed as rebellion, when the child refuses to acknowledge what the parents are directing and do things which smooth their own instincts. This rebellious child ego can be supposedly opposite of a complying ego of a child. For instance, a child starts playing in rain and she is really enjoying the rain. So of course suddenly her mother turns up and says that you're not supposed to go in rain and play. So come back. Instead of compromising to her mother, the child shouts, I don't care if I get drenched in the rain. So here we see the behavior of an adapted child. The adaptations, the kind of value systems and the kind of behavior which are desired from a child are inculcated onto the children by the parents and of course the well-wishers. So the child will start behaving in the way and the manner in which the parents want the child to be behaved, like the obedience, the kind of discipline, etc. will definitely show that this child has been adapted. So these are the positive aspects, but sometimes these things can be also behave in a very contrary manner. That is, the child becomes a rebellious child, and the rebellious child will revolt on to whatever parents say. They will not agree to it. Like for example, in this slide I gave you the example of a child who goes on when it was raining, so he was enjoying raining. The parents started shouting that you come back. The child said no, I don't care if I am drenched in the rain. So this is a negative adaptation of the behavior, ego state behavior of a child which is adapted. Now let us do some kind of transactions which take place. So first is the complementary transactions. Complementary transaction is the one in which the transaction vectors are parallel and the ego states addressed is the one which responds. So here in the first figure we see that there is adult complementary transaction, and in the other we see the parent to child and child to parent complementary transactions. So here we say whatever we desire from as a parent to onto the child, and whatever in the vice versa circumstances also. So these are complementary transactions, that is the way you want the transactions are happening from parent to child and from child to parent. So these are also called as the complementary transactions. So complementary transactions are also called as a straight transactions, and when an ego state is responded in a manner which is complementary to the question put up, in that case complementary or a straight transaction is recorded. For example, if a person asks in a calm tone from his or her fellow passenger in the train, what is the time? And the reply from the other individual is also calm, and after checking his or her watch, she has been informed the exact time to the person who asked from it. It can be regarded as a complementary transaction because the way you want the people are behaving, the way there is a message from a sender to a receiver, he is also receiving in the same manner, that is also being calm. So this is what is also called as a complementary transaction or a straight transaction. This can also be seen from a diagram which shows on the left where the two adults are transacting in a straight path. And another example which can also be given, that is a father asking his son to study instead of watching a television, and the son replying with an affirmating transaction that yes, I will study in half an hour. So we can see this transaction in again on the particular slide. The first is the adult complementary transactions, that is in this case you see the parents and there's a transaction from the parent to the child, and this particular the arrow figures, as you see the figure, it shows a very clear response that whatever the parents want the child to do, the child is also responding in the same manner. Now there is a second type of transaction which is also called as a crossed transaction. So let us have a close watch on the diagram. A crossed transaction is one in which transactional vectors are not parallel to each other, or in which the ego state addressed is not the one which responds. So we see the first figure here, which is A to A and P to C is a cross transaction. So in this, as you see, there are not the parallel lines as we have seen in the previous slide. The previous slide was a straight transaction or a complementary transaction. As we can see here, this is a complementary transaction. The desired responses are very same, and the responses as desired are also the same. Now in this particular cross transaction, we can see that the responses are not straight, and of course the state addressed is not in which it is correspond. So let us have a deep meaning of what transactions, cross transactions are all about. Where the vectors in the diagrams are crossed, the ego state addressed is different from one responding, the communication ceases. This is the second rule of communication. The diagram shows a child to a parent stimulates is crossed with the adult response in a diagram For example, the adult asks, "What is the time?" Instead of giving the same answer, the simple answer, the response is very critical, and the parents would say, "Since you are always late, why you care about the time?" The response is not very straight. The answers are very critical in this case. So that is why we call it as a cross transaction, because the responses are not in the desired way, and it is definitely like somebody asks you a time, that what is the time, and you respond that why don't you purchase your own watch? Why can't you ask somebody else? I don't have time to tell you the time. These kind of wrong answers are the basic and the core examples of cross transactions. Now the third very important type of transaction is ulterior transactions. The ulterior transactions is also, having a basic crux of the hidden message. In the ulterior transactions, two messages are conveyed at the same time. One of these messages is an overt or a social level message. The other is a covert or a psychological level message. Most often the social level content is adult. The psychological level are usually either parent-child or a child-parent. So as you see in the ulterior transaction, there is a hidden message. One from the social level point of view and one from the psychological level point of view. These transactions basically are most complex transaction ever, because the simple transactions which we have, the straight transactions, they have a straight response. The cross transactions will have always a critical response. In the ulterior transaction, the responses are hidden and there is a hidden message, and two transactions are thrown at simultaneously. These transactions are the most complex transactions, and they evolve more than two ego states. When an adult to adult talks takes place, for example, a person says to his colleague, "We need to make a lot out of this situation," showing ulterior motive to earn money by duping others. In reply to this, the other colleague winks and says, "Of course," providing the adult reply to an adult question. However, winking at the same time shows the hidden motive of a child. So we can say here that here one is a straight transaction in terms of there is a clear-cut communication from adult to adult, whereas when you talk about the other aspects, there is a hidden message of the psychology that in this particular dialogue, the adults, they want to earn certain things, and by winking of that individual and saying "of course" signifies the other part of the transaction. Now the next is stroking. Stroking is an important aspect of transactional analysis. Stroking is an act of employing recognition to other person. Stroking is recognition that a person gives to his subordinates for a good work or even a bad work done. Lack of stroking has an adverse psychological and physiological effect on the individuals. Stroking is a basic unit of motivation that can be seen from the following. First, the quantity and the quality of strokes serve as either the positive or a negative motivation for the employees. Good share of psychological satisfaction we get from work is from the strokes available from other persons. We get strokes from the work also from itself. There are positive and the negative strokes. The positive strokes are recognition, pat on the back and the affection, whereas the negative strokes could be you feel from your body language, you're hating somebody, your criticism, they are all a part and parcel of the negative stroking. So in the organization, when the transactions takes place, you would come across both the types of stroking, that is the positive as well as the negative. Of course, the positive stroking is a most important focal point in terms of motivating the people. And of course, the negative stroking, when you talk about the criticism, you talk about the other negative aspects, that this is not rightly done. There is a huge and tremendous criticism which is coming from the other side. So it serves as a negative encouragement, and sometimes negative encouragement can be positive because two negatives makes one positive. But yes, we should always strive to have the positive stroking instead of negative stroking. Now let us we have done the various components of the transactional analysis. Let us have a recap of what we did. We did in the transactional analysis, the first which we talked about was the different states of the ego, and the different states of ego we talked about three types, that is the parent, adult and the child. Then we come on to the basic parameters of the types of transactions which took place. The first one was complementary transactions, in which the responses are very straight. Then we came on to the cross transactions, in which the responses are crossed, that is, the responses are not desired and the responses are not parallel. And the third which we talked about was the ulterior transaction, in which there is a hidden message and two types of messages are thrown simultaneously, one at a social level and the other as a psychological level. Then we did the stroking. Stroking is basically a very important part of transactional analysis and is the act of employing the recognition of an individual. It could be positive, it could be negative. So the positive stroking is all about patting on the back, recognition, and giving some kind of financial emoluments or awards and applauds in recognition. Whereas the negative stroking is all about the criticism, talking wrong things about an individual. Then of course the negative stroking is not required, and nobody strives for a negative stroking in the organization. Everyone will always strive for the positive stroking in this regard. So now we have done even the recap of the transactional analysis. Now let us do the implications of the transactional analysis. The transactional analysis is practiced and understood. It can help the person understood him or herself in a better way, because we have seen the journey of the types of transactions. We have also seen the journey of the types of states, and it also makes it people aware that it is not the world outside, but they themselves who have created their own life and hence responsible for their own futures and nobody else. If there is anything in the person intrinsically which the person does not like, then transactional tools to change oneself. For instance, what type of a parent ego would serve one better than practicing the same and developing such ego states in the oneself? And similarly, the individuals would do better if they analyze which ego state to comply more often and which to use rarely. Certain types of strokes can also be practiced, and also asking for certain types of strokes one would receive. Transactional analysis also helps in exerting control over the conversations to assure that communication goes unperturbed, undisturbed, in a very honest, straightforward manner without any apparent complications. So we have seen here the implications of the transactional analysis. The implications of the transactional analysis is very deep, because one would start understanding oneself. One would start understanding which ego state to implement, whether the parent, child or adult ego. Which strokes have to be implemented, the positive strokes or the negative strokes. So basically it is the most difficult and the complex part of the psychology, of the organization behavior, of the management, that it is most important difficult task is to understand the individual, to understand their ego states, to basically give them the insights upon what circumstances they would be happy or they would be negative. So all these things have to be culminated together. That is why the basic information about the transactional analysis is at the core of the organization behavior, to make people understand each other, to make understand yourself, because once you're able to understand yourself, 50% of the problems would be solved. Now we have done in detail the concepts of transactional analysis, the types of ego states, the type of transactions. Now let us do certain benefits of transactional analysis. First, development of positive thinking. Transactional analysis brings a very positive thinking in the individuals, which has remarkable impact onto the attitude change. There are present states like confusion. The transformation is that you have a clear thinking. Again, the present states talked about defect. The transformation is that you would have a victory. Again, the present states talk about fear. So the opposite of fear is courage and achievement. Then we have frustration, loneliness, permission, pessimism, suppression. So you have to actually work upon and transform these feelings into very positive thinking, like from fear to courage, from frustration to gratification, from loneliness to togetherness, from pessimism to optimism, and from suppression to friendship. So you will be able to develop a kind of a very positive thinking if you have done the transactional analysis in a deep way. because there are so many ways, so many strategies to transform an individual, to make an individual a better human being with all better positive psyche and the mindsets of an individual. So transactional analysis will really help in doing this kind of an analysis. The second is your interpersonal effectiveness. This is again another benefit of doing a transactional analysis. So let us do this. Transactional analysis improves the interpersonal relationships. Interpersonal relationship nowadays plays a very pivotal role in order to achieve the success in the organization, because if you are not good in your interpersonal skills, then of course the organization will not be able to achieve the heights in terms of the success. So you have to be a very good communicator, you have to have a better interpersonal communication skills. If there are certain people who are having full of confusion, thoughts, ambiguities, so as a matter of fact you must transform them from pessimism to optimism, from not working to hard working, from defect to a victory, from frustration to a gratification, from loneliness to a team building, and of course the togetherness. So all these things, the transactional analysis will give us the deep information, the deep insights about all these factors, and would also help us in transforming the individuals in a very positive way. And of course, with not only this, it will also help in motivating the people. The transactional analysis is basically applied to improve the motivation of the employees. When applied, it satisfies the human needs. Enrichment of jobs is achieved by helping the fellow workers, thereby achieving the intrinsic value. It helps to change the management styles from theory X to theory Y. It helps in transformation takes place from parent to child relationship to transactional involving adult relationship, I am okay, you are not okay, to I am okay, you are okay, life positions. So this is not a very simple thing. You have to actually transform the people, you have to actually motivate the people, you have to actually make them understand, you have to convert their negative thinking into the positive thinking, you have to develop the interpersonal skills, and of course you have to implement this in OD, that is the organizational development. Organizational development refers to the development of the humanistic value. It helps the recommend that transactional analysis plays an effective role in the following areas: maintaining the adult, that is the adult transactions, to give an okay to natural child, that you are more happy with the natural child than to the adapted child, to identify and avoid the cross transactions, to minimize destructive game playing, to minimize and develop the various support systems and the policy and improvement of the work environment. So, this is basically an overall concept which we have discussed today, and let us do this very simplified way. We started with the concept of the communication. The communication has to be very simple, encoded from the receiver's point of view. The channel which you use must be clear. There should not be any ambiguities in any of the message, the use of language, etc. And of course, when you talk about the communication, the feedback mechanism has to be very, very strong, because this is the only magical tool which will also help you in knowing that actually the people have understood your basic concepts or not. Then of course we came on to the various types of ego states, that is the parent, child and adult ego. We talked about the various types of transactions. The transactions were a very straight transaction, simple transactions, the cross transactions. Then of course we talked about, because the analysis of all these aspects will have a deep impact on the policy making, to influence people, to change people, etc. Where the complementary transactions, the type of transactions which we did, the first was complementary transactions, which is about having the parallel vectors, that is their responses are very desired in the way which you want. Then we did the cross transactions, in which you can see here that there is a cross response, that is from parent to child, and from child to parent the desired actions are not there. And the example which we gave you was the time, that if you ask the time, the answer is not telling you the time in the right way. It will also say, why don't you purchase your own watch, etc. And there's a lot of criticism and negative implications in this regard. Then of course we did the ulterior transactions. The ulterior transactions, it had two messages conveyed at the same time, one from the social level and the other from the psychological level. And the ulterior transactions are most complex transactions to be analyzed. Like here, when you talk about that, let us do this work together, we can make a lot from this situation, as we did the example. Making a lot from this transaction, the other person winks and says, of course. So this is a dubious intention, and the other aspect of the psychological aspects are also being a part and parcel of this. So this is not good. Then we came on to the stroking. Stroking is basically the bundle of your thoughts, the way you applaud, the recognition, the opposite of recognition, etc. So stroking is an important aspect of transactional analysis, and it is that act of employing recognition to other persons. Stroking is recognition that a person gives to his subordinates for good work done or even the bad work done. So we did the implications that this transactional analysis helps in analyzing the individuals in deep way, the way they think, the way they perceive, to develop the positive thinking, to have the good interpersonal skills, to motivate them, to make some kind of organizational development changes. So all these factors are very important to make the strategies in the organizations. So I hope you have all understood the basic concepts of communication. We will take the Johari window and other basic issues of the communication and feedback in the coming lecture. Thank you so much.
With this note, thank you, ma'am. Thank you so very much for giving us a productive session on communication and feedback. And dear friends, we believe that this lecture might have appeared very, very beneficial to you. So if you have any feedback or queries, then do write to us at info.cc@nic.in, because we believe that our way of communication should be two-way. We would be delivering more and more lectures for you under the series Organizational Behavior, and from you we require to have your feedback, your queries, your questions. Dear friends, we are going to upload this lecture very soon on YouTube. So do watch the lectures and do write to us. We would be meeting again soon. Till then, take care. Goodbye. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much.